Longtime Star Wars fans have probably noted the numerous Buddhist and Taoist influences that add so much substance to the franchise. The story and its elements are strongly influenced by Eastern religions and philosophy, and in today's video we'll be discussing some of the most prominent aspects of Buddhism and Taoism that are showcased in the Star Wars universe. Let's dive into the video to learn more. First off, we've got the Force. The Force is described by a young Luke Skywalker as an energy field created by all living things. Obi-Wan stated that it's something that surrounds people and penetrates them, binding the universe together. Many people believe that this is quite similar to the traditional Chinese belief of Qi. Qi is described as being a life force that's present in all living things, and the way that Star Wars describes the Force, we can't help but feel like there's a very strong connection there. Another possible connection between the Force and Chinese culture is through the concept of Tao. This means the path or the way. A Jedi may think of the Force in similar terms. Tao is described as being a source and principle of cosmic order. Sound familiar? In Eastern tradition, the Tao is said to be eternal and infinite. It's the birth of all things and is present within all living beings. The similarities between this and the Force are quite clear. The Force has a very poetic description in the series, and this further relates it to Taoism. The concept of the Force was later changed and said to involve creatures called the midi-chlorians. Lucas originally stated that the Force was something that anyone could train themselves to attain. He even compared it to something like karate or yoga in an interview. Lucas said that if someone took the time to do it, they could do it. We suppose this intricacy being lost is one of the main reasons why people were so opposed to the idea of midi-chlorians. Next, we've got the concept of attachment. Buddhism has a very important and pivotal idea of letting go of one's attachments. The central teaching of the religion is said to forgo attachments and cravings. These are labeled as the cause of suffering, and the main goal of a person is to free themselves from them. Star Wars fans are probably starting to see how this may relate to the series storyline. In the prequel movie Revenge of the Sith, Yoda counsels Anakin when he's worried about the death of Padme. Yoda states that death is okay and that the fear of death is a path that leads to the dark side. Yoda continued that death is a natural part of life. Further, Yoda added that you shouldn't mourn or miss them. Instead, one should be happy that they were transformed into the Force. Yoda also guided Anakin to let go of everything that he feared to lose. In the previous movie, Anakin even told Padme that attachment was forbidden. It's clear how one of the core tenets of the Jedi, forgoing attachment, is something that's very prevalent in Buddhism too. But just as this isn't something that's easy to do in real life, so too do people in the Star Wars universe struggle with the concept. Even Luke falls victim to attachment in the sequel movies when he hesitates to burn the ancient Jedi text that he has. Yoda appeared to him as a Force ghost to tell him to let go of the text. We should also mention Luke's struggle calls back to a Buddhist story. Luke burning the Jedi text is quite similar to an old Buddhist story. It's about a Zen master who's called Dahui. He burned the printing blocks for the Zen collection of koans called the Blue Cliff Record. He did this because he noticed that the monks had become obsessed with this Zen collection. This is also similar to the idea of killing the Buddha, which is one of the concepts seen in Buddhism. According to this, you're not even supposed to idolize the Buddha itself. It essentially completely disintegrates the concept of what a Buddha is in our minds. Zen Buddhism is something that can be referred to as a spiritual warrior in a way. The founder of Zen, Bodhidharma, is said to be someone who taught Shaolin monks combat skills, so it'd make sense if this is the core concept that's used to build up the Jedi. Some people even think that the very word Jedi is derived from Jida-ijiki. This is a genre of films in Japan that revolve around the samurai and includes a bunch of spiritual practices alongside outright combat, though we can't really be sure if that's really the case. Still though, the sheer amount of similarities between the Star Wars universe and the principles of Buddhism and Taoism are just too evident to ignore. Plus, Star Wars also showcases the Buddhist concept of compassion. In the statement that Anakin tells Padme, which we talked about earlier, he continued that possession is forbidden. Instead, he relies on compassion. He defined that as unconditional love, which is essential to a Jedi's life. Compassion is another tenet that's quite vital to Buddhism. It advocates compassion for all living things. That said, fans can probably see how Anakin isn't properly understanding the message about attachments. By saying that it's forbidden, he is in a way creating an attachment to the very idea of not having any attachments. It's a circular trap that many people in Buddhism have have looked into. In Buddhism, you're not instructed to simply say that attachment itself is forbidden, but it'd be more appropriate to say that Buddhists practice the art of letting go. They're not trying to control their lives and make it so that they aren't attached to anything, but instead they take the more peaceful approach of letting go of these attachments. But again, that's much easier said than done. Moving on, let's talk a bit about meditation. Jedi are often seen meditating, being the followers of the light side of the Force. They use this as a way of centering themselves and remaining in contact with the power of the Force. As you may know, this is a very common practice in Buddhism too. In fact, some would say that it's even older than Buddhism itself, stretching back to 5000 BC. Nowadays, though, it's often associated with Buddhism, and the way it's showcased in Star Wars definitely follows that version of the activity. The idea behind meditation is to attain mindfulness and concentration. Various characters across the Star Wars universe have taken part in it to attain this. Some examples include Rey and Luke in the sequels and Obi-Wan in the prequel films. There are many ways to meditate, but in Star Wars, we often see the characters doing the cross-legged lotus position when partaking in the activity. Meditation also aims to help us understand just where our attention lies. It brings us to the current moment. This is a crucial concept in Buddhism and something that's iterated in Star Wars too. Qui-Gon Jinn advises Obi-Wan in the prequel films that, while he should be mindful of the future, this shouldn't happen at the expense of the present. Up ahead, here's why the movies may have had all these influences. Out of all the movies, The Empire Strikes Back goes into a lot more depth regarding the wisdom and philosophy surrounding the Force. It's no surprise that the film's director, Irvin Kershner, was a Buddhist himself. He stated that he wanted to introduce some Zen into the film and didn't want kids to leave the cinema feeling like all they watched was another shoot-'em-up. With Zen being a branch of Buddhism, which first came to be in China, it's clear where the inspiration for a lot of the things we learned about the Force in the Empire Strikes Back movie comes from. We can also see some parallels between Star Wars and the Buddhist mantra of Om Mani Padme Hum. Padme Amidala, the senator who falls in love with Anakin, is the most obvious parallel here. Padme in Sanskrit refers to the lotus. The flower has a ton of symbolic meaning in Buddhist traditions. While it's tough to really understand the entire phrase, it basically means the jewel in the lotus. The words Om and Hum in the phrase can be said to be spiritual sounds, and so they're somewhat impossible to translate. But even with the basic understanding we have of the phrase, it isn't hard to see how it relates to Star Wars and its characters. There's also yin-yang and the Tao of Star Wars. It wouldn't be wrong to think that the Tao is like the Force, both of which lead to two opposing forces. The light is represented by the yang, while the dark is the yin side. That said, the yin-yang symbol actually goes back even further than Taoism. Plus, the yin side isn't really the dark side itself. It's not meant to be something evil. Instead, it showcases the opposite, like how every day has a night and every up has a down. This calls back to the concept of balance, which is yet again something that's very prominently shown in Star Wars. For the sake of drama, the series does equate the dark side as being the evil one, but even the ones on the light side often lack balance. Lucas even stated that the basic philosophy of the Force is that there's a dark side and a light side. One of the two is selfless while the other is selfish. This creates a unique balance between the two, similar to how Taoism guides people on to balance themselves and to align themselves with the flow of the Tao. The Jedi way is also to find balance and to align with the way of the Force. The concept isn't to push things to make them appear a certain way, but rather to go with the flow and not against it. Finally, Yoda's iconic wisdom may also be related to a Taoist concept. Yoda's famous words, "Do or do not, there is no try," may originate from a Taoist concept too. This is the concept of Wu Wei, which means effortless effort. It's an act that's done without needing to try or even think. Some people like to think of it as letting go of a bow without even thinking about it. It's not tough to see how Yoda's wisdom relates to the concept of Wu Wei. All in all, Star Wars offers a ton of wisdom that's taken from both Eastern and Western cultures, and that's what helps to make this story about aliens and intergalactic battles so much more relatable and understandable to us as people. That's a wrap for this video. What are your thoughts on all these Buddhist and Taoist influences present in Star Wars? Comment below, give this video a thumbs up, and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.